Good afternoon, everyone. You can give it up. You can give a big round of applause. You can be as excited as you want to be, because I honestly believe that these type of events are the celebration. We want to celebrate an extraordinary individual. We're going to have some extraordinary individuals on the stage for an extraordinary cause. So always feel free to clap and show celebration anytime you feel like it. Good afternoon and welcome to the Green and Gold Speaker Series featuring California Secretary of State Shirley Ann Weber. We thank you for joining us as we explore the topic of reparatory justice. My name is Jerry Blake, and as Retention Senior Lead for the Education Opportunity Program, I am honored to present today's land acknowledgement. Sacramento State acknowledges with respect the land our campus is on today was and continues to be the homeland of the indigenous people of this area, the Nisena, specifically the Nisum Pawalan and Miwok. The larger Sacramento area and its rivers serve as a gathering place for many local tribes from the surrounding valley and foothills, including the southern Maidu, Patwin, and Wintun. Sacramento State recognizes these lands and riverways as unceded traditional territories of the Native peoples. We further recognize these California Native nations and respect their sovereignty. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm the university's commitment to build relationships and foster a university environment of success to better serve Native nations and communities. We take time to give such an acknowledgement as an act of resistance to the erasure of indigenous history and working towards honoring and inviting the truth into our space, discussion, and communities. Thank you. Now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Mia Setters Tidwell, Vice President of Inclusive Excellence and Sacramento State's University Diversity Officer.
Good afternoon. Oh, you all have to do better than that. Good afternoon. We are so excited to have our Secretary of State here on our journey to become an anti-racism and inclusive campus. We embarked on that journey at Sacramento State in 2021, and now we have 200 action steps and 28 goals towards that effort. This is our 13th goal, the goal of bringing dynamic, informed, wise speakers to our campus. We're focused this year on justice because there's been so many injustices done in our country that we want to figure out together how to seek, reach, and realize justice. I want to thank the entire Inclusive Excellence team, especially Rob Reyes, for the wonderful exhibit on reparations from 1783 to present. It gives us a history, a shared history of what is owed to us. So it is such a pleasure to have our Secretary of State here who's put forth the bill to look at reparations from a California point of view and for a world point of view for African American people. To introduce our Secretary today, we have our wonderful Dr. Marceline Watson-Derveny, who oversees over 25 educational equity programs. She is our Associate Vice President for Student Retention and Success, and she's my sister in justice. So I'm going to call her to the stage to welcome our Secretary.
Thank you so much, Inclusive Excellence, and thank you so much to Rob. I wanted to say thank you. To Mia, you are my heart. Everyone loves you. You embody diversity, equity, and inclusion. We appreciate your leadership and your vision. To our cabinet members that are in the room, thank you for being here. To all of our community guests, faculty, and staff. It is my honor and privilege, humbly, to do the introduction of our keynote speaker for today. Today is a profound moment and a profound opportunity in the heart of the Sacramento State community. It is my honor and privilege to introduce to you a person of power, a person of grace, a person of tenacity and profound leadership. Secretary Weber was nominated to serve as California Secretary of State by Governor Gavin Newsom in 2020 and sworn into office in 2021. She is California's first Black Secretary of State and is only the 5th African American to serve as a state constitutional officer in California's 170-year history. That deserves a round of applause. That's amazing. That's awesome. Weber was born to sharecroppers in Hope, Arkansas during the Jim Crow era. Her father, who left Arkansas after being threatened by a lynch mob, did not have the opportunity to vote until he was in his 30s. Her grandfather never voted, as custom and law in the South before the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Although her family moved to California when Weber was just 3 years old, it was this experience that really shaped her activism and her drive to do legislative work. She has fought to secure and expand civil rights for all Californians, including restoring voting rights for individuals who have completed their prison term. Weber attended the University of California at Los Angeles, receiving her BA, master's degree, and PhD by the age of 26. And she has served graciously in higher ed for over 40 years and then retired, served as a department chair, was a faculty member, and a true leader on her campus. Before her appointment, Secretary Weber served 4 terms as an assembly member representing California's 79th Assembly District. And she also served in the San Diego Unified School District, and twice as a California elector. During her tenure in the Assembly, Weber chaired a variety of high-level committees, including but not limited to the Assembly Elections Committee, the Assembly Budget Subcommittee on Public Safety, as well as the Assembly Budget Committee on Health. You can see from her record of accomplishments that she's highly distinguished, she's giving back, she's leading the way. She also chaired a committee on campus climate that was created to examine and mitigate hate crimes on California's college and university campuses. From 2019 to 2020, she also served as the chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus. Clearly, she has a passion, and she is tireless in her quest for equality and fairness in all sectors of life that has resulted in her great life's work. So it gives me great pleasure today to bring to the stage someone of passion, someone of leadership, someone of determination, someone that's fighting on the front lines for you and I today, who's paving the way and who's clearly a role model. Please rise to your feet and provide her with a warm-hearted welcome and round of applause. The next voice you will hear is that of Secretary Weber, our leader, our madam, our advocate. Thank you so much for speaking today.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be here, and thank you for the very warm welcome and all of the wonderful activities that have occurred this afternoon we're at afternoon now. That has occurred this afternoon concerning reparations and concerning this campus's commitment to equity and inclusion, which is a concept that all of us should be striving to achieve for all of us, every last one of us. There shouldn't be no one in this audience or in this state who does not feel welcome, who does not feel included, and who does not believe that they have the capacity and the ability to give back and to contribute to this nation. So I'm really pleased to be here with you, to be a part of this conversation. This is Black History Month, and I always say it's the busiest month of the year for Black people, because we're often invited to so many different events. And I'm going to apologize at the beginning of this lecture, because when 1 o'clock comes, I really have to be out to get on a plane to do another lecture at San Diego State. So, but I'm glad to be with you this morning and to really share with you something in terms of thoughts with regards to reparations. Many folks want to know, how did the bill come about? What is it supposed to do? Where are we now? What's taking place? And, reparations, as I think about it, when I decided to author the bill, I did something probably that I normally don't do, is I didn't consult a lot of people in the community. because I wanted the bill to get out of the House. And I say that because people have been arguing over reparations forever and ever. And oftentimes we allow ourselves to defeat ourselves because we can't come together and do something small like, let's talk about reparations. Let's put it in a task force. Let's do something unique. And so I didn't consult. I did not consult a lot of African Americans. I had some committees that were involved in reparations in the state who eventually got involved with the bill. But I tried to keep that at a minimum because I wanted the bill to be simple. I want the language to be clear, something that we could all rally around and not get caught up in all of the different ideologies and other things that have a tendency to kill an idea. Because everyone agreed that was obviously involved that there should be reparations. But what it should be, we could have spent a lifetime, and we will continue to spend a lifetime talking about what it should be and what it must be. But I didn't want the bill to die before we had a chance to have that conversation and to generate interest across the state on reparations. So it's interesting that when folks found out they wanted to have input and they did their best to try to manipulate and change it at the end, and I said no, I pushed it through and got it through both houses and signed by the governor, and that was it. And so I didn't seek that much advice on such a controversial topic. I also decided that I was going to do it because the nation was trying to get reparations, a very divided nation on a very critical issue. And they had been trying for 40 years. And it was interesting because when I passed the bill, when I got the bill passed, people said, well, don't you feel you're undercutting the national effort, that you are basically not going to make it a national thing, that people will be upset and now will be confused even more and divided, and it went on and on and on. And I said, kind of like King, how long should we wait? You've had 40 years to pass a bill in this House. You've had Democrats, you've had a Republican leadership, you've had Democratic leadership, you've had houses that were run by the president who was a Democrat and who was president, Democrat. You had the Assembly, you've had you've had assemblies, but you also had the Senate and the House of Representatives. You've had a complete of individuals who think in reparations, and yet you've not been able to get this bill passed. So after 40 years, after the last one was introduced, I said, I can do this. California can do this. I decided that since California is now moving toward being the fourth largest economy in the world, and we can do everything else, we can talk about reparations. And so the result, we move forward. So I'm asked, what is reparations and what should we be striving for? And I didn't want to tell the committee what to do. That's why I formed the committee rather than just deciding myself and the legislature what we would do. But it's extremely important as we think about it. If you went through the exhibit in the hall over there, what you saw is a lot of folks who have done reparations. And I think it's important that we put that in that context, that folks think it's rare and unusual. It is rare to the extent that the damage is under 400 years. So that makes it even more complicated than before. And and so as a result, you look up the wall and you see that we have had reparations for Native Americans. We've had reparations for the Jewish communities. We've had reparations for other immigrants who've come here. We've had reparations significantly across this nation. And mainly because we feel that when people have been done harm, there has to be some repair done, some effort to repair what had been done. And there were some efforts in the past to deal with reparations, particularly the 40 acres and a mule. But like so many things, we discovered that when it was a good idea, when it finally got into implementation, African Americans did not get the 40 acres and a mule. The resources were given to those who had owned slaves with the idea that they didn't want to make those slave owners madder than they already were. And it was interesting to me because when I talked about reparations early in my life, when I was on the school board and we talked reparations, my congressman came to my office because I had a radio program. And I asked him, I said, are you going to support the congressional bill on reparations? And he was very pro everything in the African-American community, but he said no. I said, why? He says, after I do that, he said, white people will be very mad and will be very divided. And I said, do you think black people are mad? Do you think we think there's unity when we haven't ever been respected with reparations or even have a conversation? And then I asked him the other thing, why should my whole life be built on whether or not they're mad, but nobody's concerned about me being mad? Am I not worthy enough to have some anger in me about not being treated fairly? And he never thought of that. I said, my whole life in your perspective and my whole life in slavery was what? I was supposed to make somebody else happy. Nobody worried about where I lived. Nobody worried about whether or not I had a future. They didn't even care about if I had a wife or children. But my whole existence was making somebody else happy. And oftentimes when they were not happy, we end up being sold. And after slavery, we end up being lynched. So at some point, this nation has to take into consideration how I feel and what should be done to me. And people need to put themselves in a position and say, if I had been enslaved in this country for 400 years, if I had helped build every major monument, whether it's the White House or other kinds of statues around Washington, if I had built the economic structure, if the hard work of my labor had been the foundation of this nation to make it a great nation in terms of free labor from Africans, how would I feel after all of those years? It seemed like every effort was meant to deter me from being successful. That a few got through, but it wasn't the pattern. That whether my school districts, whether it's a university, where it had to do with businesses and business ownership, all those kinds of things. How would I feel? How should you feel after 170 years? You've only had 5 African-American constitutional officers after 170 years in California. How would you feel? How should you feel? How do African-Americans feel to knowing that there's not been a person, a Secretary of State, African-American, in the 170-year history of California? And there probably wouldn't be one if the governor hadn't appointed me. I'm ever conscious of that, to bring me to the attention of the entire state, not just my district, but the entire state, and make it possible then to be well-known and supported, to be actually fully elected to Secretary of State this past November. If the governor had not been bold enough, would that have happened? And therefore open the gate for Malia Coyne to come with me as we campaign across the state to have a controller who was a constitutional officer. If he had not opened that door, then we probably would not have had, we've only had Thurman as our educational person, as constitutional officer. So someone has to be bold enough to open the door, to make the possibilities there. And that's extremely important as we talk about reparations, as we talk about the nation moving forward, any of those things. I think of young people often here at this university, that if someone doesn't reach out to you, and you're here at the university, I never felt that way with me. I was one of very few students at UCLA when I went to UCLA. I think there may have been 300 of us that were undergraduate, graduate, law students, and med school, all together, 300 out of 30-something thousand students. You felt lonely and you felt invisible. Were it not for Dr. Molefi Asante, who was my advisor, who took me under his wings and opened up the institution to me, I would have never gotten a PhD. It would have been much more difficult. I might have gotten an EDD, but I would never have progressed as quickly as I did through the PhD program, because he nominated me as a Woodrow Wilson Fellow. And once you become a fellow, doors open for you. And so I'm ever conscious of the fact that it is difficult when you haven't had before, when you've been denied opportunities, and you see things and you realize that your folks want the same things as everybody else. But opening up that door and creating that opportunity is sometimes key to basically becoming successful. And everyone recognizes that. And when you have just a few people who actually make it through, it becomes even more difficult because you don't have them accessible to you all the time. So reparations is extremely important in this country because we have a history of reparations, and we do reparations. Reparations, the task force that was formed out of AB 3121 was really a task force to study and make recommendations for reparations in California. And they've been working now for over a year and a half, to basically, and some of you have seen some of the hearings and have attended some of them, and I think one of your faculty members actually researching the hearings, where they're going and finding examples and information on individuals with regards to what happened in different sections of California. Some ask, why California? California's this golden state. It wasn't a part of the Jim Crow laws. It didn't have slavery. It wasn't a slave state. All those kinds of things. But when you begin to look at California and you begin to read the history of California, and you read the history of the first governor of California, he was real clear that he did not want African Americans in the state of California. He did not believe they deserved to have any kind of support or education. He also believed the same thing about our Native Americans and felt that this should be our time of extinction. that we should eliminate all of these folks out of California. And so as a result of that, California was not a part of many of the things that happened here in terms of the gold rush. They were, to the extent that they were brought in for labor. And slavery was allowed to exist in California. Even though we didn't do slave trade, so they brought in slaves from across the nation to work in California for free. And so when we talk about the greatness and the wealth of California, a lot of that was built on the backs of African Americans in areas and communities around this state and around Sacramento State, I should say. But there were a number of communities formed here. And it's interesting that when reparations was passed, one of my colleagues who staff sent me a whole bunch of information that they had concerning his district, which is this whole county up here, and the various encampments and the places where slaves were kept and where they worked and what they did, all around California to make California this great state in the early 1800s. So when we talk about reparations, this task force has uncovered a tremendous amount of information. They've also uncovered deeds that were stolen, land that was taken from individuals, all kinds of things that we sometimes have swept under the rug, pretended didn't exist, and others have benefited from having free land or free opportunity in California. So we decided that it would be important for Californians to talk about California's true past and true history, and to then talk about reparations and what we need to do as a state to repair the damage that has been done. This task force was basically organized with the governor, the president pro tem, and the speaker of the House. Each one of them had a responsibility to nominate a number of individuals to serve on the task force. I didn't do any of the nominations. I didn't influence it at that level because I felt it needed to, once I got the legislation passed, I needed to hand it to the community and the people in the state to basically have a discussion, and invite all of you into the discussion and to make recommendations to move forward as it should be. And so we hope that will happen is that the task force was formed. It has been meeting throughout the state. It was in San Diego last week. My understanding is it's supposed to be somewhere here in Sacramento, and somebody mentioned Sac State in March, the weekend of March 4th. And so the task force will be coming here. It's on its last rounds, going to various places to share with them their ideas, to take ideas from them, and to educate and to basically create a task force recommendation. It is important that there were some controversial issues with the task force. And the task force decided, which we had said in the beginning, that the task force is designed to basically provide reparations to those who are descendants of slaves in the United States. And so that if someone had come here from Barbados in the last 10 years, they would not be eligible for reparations. Because even though the racism is still here, we talk about the damage that's done as a result of having descendants who were slaves, who did not get a chance to read, to write, and therefore could not oftentimes provide you with the opportunity as children and grandchildren that was so essential for your growth and development. That the issue of wealth, intergenerational wealth, began in slavery when people were property was taken from them if they had any at all, or they were denied the opportunity to own property. And so therefore we begin this whole issue of poor intergenerational wealth. You begin to talk about a lack of educational opportunities early on because of that, and you begin to see the impact and the continuing impact because of slavery. Some people say, well, that's happened 100 years ago, 150 years ago. And it's not so much that it happened 150 years ago. It talks about what happened as a result of it, because you look at redlining, you look at the way communities are developed, you look at how the schools are built, you see all these kinds of things that happen that still have an impact and creating an unequal setting and an unequal environment in California. And so as a result of that, the focus is on those who had been descendants of slaves, who had either had relatives who were descendants of slaves, or who had relatives who lived in the United States during slavery. Because obviously, when you lived in the United States as a free Black, you had limited opportunity, and your life was as fragile as anyone else's. People were not prosecuted for lynching people or burning them down or burning their properties down. And so those who lived in the United States who lived here during slavery and immediately afterwards were treated as second-class citizens and continued to be treated as second-class citizens, and in some cases continue that today. Some ask, what is reparation involved? And hopefully it will involve all of those things, because what the commission has done is has looked at not only economic issues, because everybody thinks, well, everybody will get a check and move on. I'm not sure if $20,000 can handle 400 years of oppression. And in California, $20,000 won't even buy a garage. Not talking about a house. And everybody knows that. So you have to go far, 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 far away to find some land for $20,000. It would not be in California, that is for sure. So we know that reparations may involve some finances, but it probably may not involve cash out. Some say it should be an acknowledgement, and there's no question that apologies are extremely important, an acknowledgement. But we also know apologies without action means very little, and you're still in the same position, maybe with a smile on your face, because somebody said they're sorry. But in the end, you still have things that you don't have. Issues of housing, African Americans have the lowest percentage of ownership of housing. And everyone knows that a house is, for most folks, poor people particularly, it is your statement of economic wealth. It is intergenerational if you're smart, because you pass it from generation to generation. It is often used to develop wealth, because if we have a house, you can always mortgage it to do things for a business, for your kids to go to college. It becomes your wealth. If most of us talk about how wealthy we are, we would first count the value of our home, because most of us don't have, whether it's black, white, or whatever, don't have wealth and it's just given to us as a legacy. But we do have property and ownership of property and things that basically create our wealth. And of course there will be issues concerning businesses and redlining and loans and those kinds of things that are there. We are optimistic that the Reparations Task Force will basically present its findings this July to the community, and then we'll move forward with the implementation that's there. But I just simply want to say in closing, because I know I only have time right now for questions and answers, I understand that comes next, is to say that in the process of creating this whole task force with regards to reparations, my interest was to create some sense of equity and fairness in the conversation, to create an opportunity for this state to basically lead the nation in what needs to happen with reparations. California is the largest state in the union. Its income is greater than, it's almost greater as the entire nation. If you took California's wealth out of the United States, we would not be listed among the top 10. We are the fourth largest economy in the world. We should keep that in mind. And so as a result, the way we have handled our resources, that we should handle them, is clear that we can do these things. We can do anything we choose to do. We have the largest educational system also in the world, with our community colleges, our CSUs, our UCs, and our private institutions. We have the largest network of education, and we should be able to educate all of our children should we choose to do so, and we used to do that. So we have the capacity to do that. We have the largest tech industry. People talk about businesses leaving California. We have basically had more people come back to California for businesses than those who left. So our economics, when you begin to ask questions, and we talk in the billions and hundreds of billions of dollars of California resources, it's amazing what is there. And clearly it is something that can be done and should be done. And so many will ask, well, my parents weren't enslavers, and my parents didn't own slaves, so why should I have to pay for it? That may be true, but the reality is you live on the legacy of the greatness of whiteness. And you're able to amass wealth that other people cannot if you choose to. You don't have the same barriers that are placed on you that others have. I often talk about, people talk about the glass ceiling and the glass ceiling for white women in terms of moving up the corporate ladder. I believe I live in a steel ceiling. And it's a lot different, because when you're a glass ceiling, you can look and you have role models that you can see what's happening in the other room. If you get real smart, you see how they're dressed and you know how to dress up with them. If you're really good, you learn to read lips so you can figure out what they're talking about. And you know that there's only one level above you, or whether there's two levels above you, because it's a glass ceiling. When you're in a steel ceiling, you don't know if you're in the bottom or the top. You discover that you thought you were at the top and you're really at the bottom. That happens sometimes in salary negotiations, where you thought you was the top dog making the money, and then you discovered that you weren't at all. You also don't know whether or not how to climb, whether you have to go outside to find the door to get in, or whether you can get the door from inside. You have no idea what is above you when you're in a steel ceiling. And that's extremely important, and it is hard to crack through a steel ceiling. And so when we look at African Americans' lives and the things that have happened, we've been in a steel ceiling. I know when I ran for office, I had no idea, and when I first ran in school board, there were no role models to help me figure out how to run for school board. There were no ways that were there. There were no large donors as people had as friends, because all my friends are working people. And so it becomes much more difficult to figure out how to get through this maze without help and support. When I ran for the assembly, the same thing. I fortunately had a friend, Toni Atkins, who became Speaker of the House, who encouraged me to run, but she said something that nobody else could say. She said, I want you to run, and I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you. And she did. In only ways that she could, because she was a white female who was very successful and was about to become Speaker and could open doors for me that I didn't even know existed. So it's really important when you start talking about the impact of slavery, the impact on people's lives and opportunities that were not created, the doors that were never opened. And while you may be doing well, but if you had the resources to basically do something else, you probably would, or to do more than you're currently doing. So I want to thank you today for allowing me to come and talk about reparations. I think that those who are talking about it and those who will, it has now obviously hit the airways, so everybody's saying that Black people are going to get $250,000 each. I heard that. And people want to know, what's my response to that? My response is that, would that be enough for you after 400 years? Living in California where you can't buy a house for $250,000, would that be enough? That's the question. I ask people to personalize it. If you had been in these situations where every opportunity you've had to try to be successful has been thwarted, dreams tossed out, things limited for you, and it's been twice as hard to do certain things, and we've been raised to basically expect twice as much or twice the effort to get anything done, would that be enough for you? So when people ask about it's $250,000, what do you think about $250,000? I turn it back to them and say, is it enough for you? If your legacy, your parents, your grandparents, my grandparents never voted in never got a chance to vote in this United States because they were part of the Jim Crow laws in the 60s. And they died before 1965, the Voting Rights Act. So would that be enough for you? Would that be enough to live in terror, to live in fear as they did every day? And for my father to have to leave the South because of Jim Crow and because obviously they were going to lynch him. So would that be enough to leave all your family, your land, everything in Arkansas and have to come to California to try to create a new life? Would that be enough? Most people would say no. I want a little bit more than that. I want a little bit more justice. I want a system that works. And hopefully the reparations will deal with in changing our system so that our system becomes fairer and have some sense of equity, and that we have an investment that is long-term and not just a splash in the pan because it seems to be convenient for us to do so. So once again, thank you very much. I'm Shirley Weber, your California Secretary of State. I'm honored to be here. I'm the author of AB 3121, as well as the author of 1460, which makes ethnic studies required in every CSU system. And I think that is extremely important because much of what we lack is knowledge and information about ourselves and about everybody around us. And that is going to be critical if we're going to have a nation that respects all people and values the contributions of everyone. We need to know more about the people sitting next to us, in front of us, and back of us, around us, and learn to respect their energy and their resources and their culture. That is so critically important. So thank you very much. I look forward to the questions that are going to be asked of me. I know that there's some powerful young people coming up who have some really hard questions, I understand, and I'm looking forward to that. But once again, thank you so very much for having me with you today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Terrence Doss, and I'm a current graduate student here at Sac State. My concentration is higher education leadership, and I'm also a current staff worker working in university advancement.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine Owens. I am a fourth-year sociology major. I am also a student assistant at the Martin Luther King Jr. Center here on campus. Thank you. I am also a member of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated.
So thank you for everyone joining us today. We have a few questions from the online audience as well. Thank you to the online audience. A Pew survey in November of last year found that 77% of Black Americans support reparations for slavery, while only 18% of white Americans do. What does that mean for the work of the task force? Can you talk about ways to increase public support for reparation and how we might achieve this in partnership with our white allies? In other words, how can reparations and the awareness of them be meaningful to everyone and not just one group of people?
Well, thank you very much for that question. And I kind of referenced it a little bit in the presentation, but clearly, it's understandable that those who think they have resources and available to them are not always willing to examine themselves and the resources they have and whether or not they're going to win or lose in the process of reparations. It is imperative that much progress can be made, but it has to also be made by those who are in this audience who are white. And reparations won't rest on you, that if you don't support it, Black folks are still going to fight for it, because that's extremely important. And we can't necessarily decide that a good idea or a necessary idea, a justice and freedom, rest on the shoulders of whites being good people. But we have to at least say to those who are here and who are part of it, that you have a responsibility to push the issue yourself. I mean, you probably won't even notice that certain things don't exist for you anymore as a result of reparations because of the wealth of California. Just think about it. How many people got paid and didn't go to work in California during the pandemic? If we had said everybody could still get a check every month and be at home, we would have thought that was the craziest idea we ever heard of. And yet everybody got a check and stayed home. And there were some folks who worked at different places, but it didn't break the bank in California. In fact, we came out of the pandemic with more money than we had before. Isn't that amazing? That when you make up your mind to do something, you're not that poor after all. And when we've done things like created health care for individuals in California, or we've opened up the university to Native Americans, we still serve our students. We still serve our population. So it's not a matter of taking something from other people. It's about expanding the base of support. It's about expanding the opportunities that are there. And I think so often we think it's a zero-sum game. If you get a sandwich, I don't get anything to eat. When there's plenty of bread and peanut butter in California that everybody can eat. And so I think so those who are here have to basically understand that we have to do this. That we have tried so many ways to try to make things a little bit better. And it's really just a little bit here and a little bit there. But we have not changed the narrative in California about wealth, about equal opportunity, about access, about what we have done and how we have become wealthy as a result of someone else's pain. We have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge it. And only when we do we get to a point where we become better people in California. It's extremely important. And I think, as I said, I think California can do it. Other states have struggled with it, but I believe California can do it. And I know a number of friends who believe it should happen, that they're tired of hearing about poor school systems and kids not getting to the university. They're tired of hearing about communities that don't have access to resources and all those kinds of things. We're tired of hearing that when the school shut down, we didn't have internet in certain communities at all, when everybody else had all the internet they wanted. We're tired of hearing that in California. We can do something about it. And we can uplift the not only those who are the most affected by reparations, but we actually uplift the spirit of those who are around. That those who've done this, that those who have really worked to overcome and to create some sense of equity and fairness in California. There's an article in the paper about a family in Britain, and some of you may have seen it. If I got the name, it's a long name, starts with an L. Their family was in the Caribbean, and they owned 1,000 slaves they discovered through the history. And they had bought several sugar farms and all kinds of things. And now they have decided that they made all this money on slavery, that they have to do reparations. So this family is doing it themselves in finding the families who lived on that plantation to try to give them back some land and some other things, because they said they became very wealthy on someone else's misery. And they're still wealthy. And they still have plenty of wealth. And they're trying to do some sense of equity and fairness in the area of reparations. And so it was really quite interesting. It's an article that was in the paper about a British family. But all of us can do it, and that's what's happening across the states. I think everyone takes ownership of it. I'm not going to rest all of the success of it on the shoulders of the goodness of whites, because there'll be some who won't be very good. But I think those who are serious about it, who are listening carefully, when the naysayers begin to talk and what have you, will stand up and defend it and say it's about time. It's about time, 400 years, that we really grapple with the issue of African Americans, and we'll have to grapple with the issues of Native Americans, and it goes on and on. But it's about time that we can't continue on this path.
Thank you for that answer. There is a lot of news around how books are being banned and concepts like critical race theory are being demonized. In your experience, how is the current political and social landscape mirroring policies that limited opportunity for minorities in the past? Do states like California even have a chance to overcome the systems and processes that were designed to impede the progress we seek?
I think we do. The unique thing, and I say this to folks because I've been a part of the, somebody lost a walkie-talkie. Okay. I don't know who it is, but I don't. But anyway, I don't know what's going on around here. But, I started laughing. I forgot what. Oh, about critical race theory. I got it. Okay. It's always interesting to me that those who want to talk about critical race theory don't even know what they're talking about. That's the first thing. I'm trying to figure out, who are these people? They have no background, no knowledge, no information. We've been doing this kind of conversation forever. It's about the truth. It's about the truth. What is this, the history of this nation? And simply because you ban it, we should even be more outraged, because we've gone through the dark era where people don't want you to read books and it's going to destroy you and so forth. I mean, what kind of Neanderthal are these people that they think they can go around here and just ban you from reading and ban you from seeing things and understanding? How sad it is that we have folks who are preying on folks who don't understand what's going on. The fact that you read and you study about slavery doesn't make you less of a person. It should make you enlightened. If the fact that you read about race matters as an issue, or Black Lives Matter, or Blue Lives Matter as a history piece, it's not going to make you less of a person. It teaches us that we're a nation that has challenges, but we're also a nation that's open to conversation, and that people are free to have conversation. I mean, we're not like some of these other countries, at least we shouldn't be, where people can't read certain things and you can't teach certain things. And teachers are afraid in the South that if they teach about Martin Luther King or anybody else, that they're going to be fired. This is the stuff that they're talking about. We should be outraged. The good thing I tell people is that while everybody else is running away from it and is afraid of issues, California is running to it. In 1460, the bill that I authored, it is requiring every graduate of the Cal State system, CSU system, to have at least one course in ethnic studies. That will not break the bank. You already require 120, so you're going to give three units out of 120 to either Black, Brown, Native American, or Asian. You're going to give 3 units of learning about somebody. And I can tell you, having spent 40 years at the university teaching ethnic studies and traveling the country with students and Africa and all around, that my white students are just enlightened when they get into a class on ethnic studies, or when they travel to another country. Their whole world changes. And I see them as adults now who are practicing law and running corporations and those kinds of things. They're not as afraid of people as other people are. They have friends that are diverse. They live in a diverse world. I mean, that's true liberation, when you can face information that may not be always beneficial to you, but you can learn from it, you can grow from it, and you can commit yourself to fashioning a different kind of history. So and I, I mean, I've been to so many of these things, and the whole issue with AP classes and 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 trying to get courses that kids can take to get credit for in college. The Africana Studies AP course, I was a part of that early, as we talk about maybe 20 years ago when I was president of the National Council of Black Studies. We work hard to get an AP course in Black Studies. That's a high level of learning of information. And then we're going to have people say, we're not going to have our kids learn that. How crazy can you be? So we are living in a time where people are preying on people's fears. What do you think will happen if you study Black history? You won't be Black. You'll still be white. It's okay. It's kind of like my friend when I was in the dorm at UCLA 100 years ago, and kids want to get grits in the dorm. And that white folks didn't deal with a lot of grits at that time. And so, at least not in California. And I had some of my friends come and say, well, what would happen to us if we eat grits? I said, you'll get full. What can I say? Grits is a heavy breakfast, I mean? But it's out of fear and lack of information that's there. You're not gonna turn it against all your friends, but you will at least learn something that may make you a better person. I've never been to any country where I didn't engage myself in the culture, that I didn't learn something about those folks, their struggles, their victories that made me a better person. Period. And it's critical. And those of you in education should be outraged that even these folks somewhere, not in California, thank God, but in these other states are really wanting to deprive their young people of knowledge. And I think most of us thought that was something of the past, of the dark eras, where people banned books and would burn books and all that kind of stuff. But Paulo Freire talked about the fact that when you basically deny people of knowledge of themselves, you then can shape their future into anything you want them to be. And that's extremely important, that we don't want folks to just take our young people's minds and shape them into anything. We want them to basically be able to deal with the material themselves and to know the material and to be able to have conversations about it. But it's really tragic. It is tragic. And so California, we're running to it. We're making sure that our K-12s and our post-secondaries all have ethnic studies. All of them that have been in California. We're celebrating it. If you come to my archives, we have all kinds of new things in there now that women, testimonies of women about their struggles in California. We want people to look at California as an example of how people can live in harmony with each other in the midst of the chaos and confusion that we currently have across the nation.
Thank you, Secretary Weber. As an institution, we have committed ourselves to adopting anti-racism, anti-oppression, and inclusive behaviors. As we begin searching for a new university president, how can we ensure that our equity-minded values are embedded in that process, especially if it is conducted by the Chancellor's office and not by stakeholders here on campus?
Well, the people of California still have power. And even though the Chancellor's office involved in the selection, you have people from this district and from this area who are in the Chancellor's office. So you're not powerless. Somebody says Chancellor, everybody starts shaking. Keep in mind the Chancellor is hired by the trustees, and those trustees are appointed by the governor, and those folks are appointed by, represent you. I mean, when we did AB 1460, the Ethnic Studies Bill, everybody was afraid because the Chancellor was totally opposed to it. The governor signed a bill, okay? And the governor appoints trustees. And so you have to work the system. You have people here who understand the system, who can work the system. You should make sure that whoever is being considered, that you have access to that list of individuals and the ability to influence it. So you're going to determine it by looking at what they've done already. Don't listen to people who tell you what they're going to do and they've been at higher ed for 30, 40 years. Ask what have they done. Because if they go do it and have done it in 40 years, you'll be real old when they finally do it. So you should make sure that you're picking a person and that they're selecting from a group of people who have done, who have done the work of equity and diversity, whose team looks like the state of California. So when you look at someone who's coming from somewhere else, you want to ask, what was your vice president, your provost? Did you have some women? Did you have some people of color? Did you have a diverse leadership? If they did, that's not somebody you want. because they have to value diversity, not just in language, but in practice. And so when you come to a campus and you see the president, the vice president, you see women in positions, you see people of color in positions, you then know that everybody has a seat at the table. And that becomes extremely important in the conversation that's there. My friend used to always say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Okay? So you don't want to be on the menu. You want to be at the table so you can influence the conversations.
Okay, thank you so much, Secretary Weber. And our last question for you today. Perpetual psychological distress can be traced over time through generations of Black communities. This has led to increased health problems that show up in several ways. How might mental health support be incorporated into state-level repertory actions?
Well, hopefully it will be. I know that there are folks who they've looked at the issue of health in California, and we've been dealing with this issue of trauma health among children in the legislature. But a part of the whole issue of reparations is the issue of counseling, support for young people, support for families that are there, but a lot of the things are resolved when you actually provide relief for families. I mean, you talk about trauma, and you end up with mom's unemployed, so and so and so and so. Your house is being, basically being evicted. You don't have this, you didn't have that. That creates even more trauma. So being able to provide some sense of relief for individuals, immediately deal with some of the health issues. But in addition to all of that, funding of health services and support in communities and in schools is critically important. Mental health is a major issue for everyone in this state. I think we recognize that every time something happens, it has a lot to do with mental health, And so now we're getting to the point where there's not a whole lot of stigma attached to it as it once was. And I think that's a good thing. We have to also apply that in Black communities as well, that when we have health centers, there has to be mental health centers in those communities, and not just because people have a cold or flu, but you want them to basically be physically and mentally safe and healthy.
So thank you everybody for coming today. That unfortunately concludes our Q&A with Secretary Weber. I am pleased to invite Rob Reyes, Director of Inclusive Excellence Learning and Unlearning, to close us out.
Can we give it another round of applause for our student moderators, Terrence Doss and Jasmine Owen? And of course, thank you to the Secretary for her words and invaluable insights today. Just being in the room is an important aspect of our commitment to this work. As a thank you, we have framed a photograph of the Wide Open Walls Inclusive Mural Project. So the Secretary, when she looks at it, can be reminded that institutions like Sac State remain committed and continue to do the good work here on campus and across the region. So, Secretary, Terrence, you want to pass them? And we'll have someone take that for you in a moment. As an additional resource for those looking to learn more about reparations and reparatory justice, the University Library has developed a webpage for anyone to explore using the link that is being dropped in the chat on now, or by visiting the Green and Gold speaker page on reparatory justice. As part of our commitment to assessing our events, I believe an anonymous feedback QR code will be put on the screen shortly, but a link will also be emailed to everyone who registered so that you can give us your feedback so we can do better in the future. Next, beginning at 1:30, we will be hosting a community forum to respond to the tragic loss of yet another member of the Black community, this time at the hands of the Memphis Police Department. So from 1:30 to 3:30, all students are welcome as we learn from Sacramento State Campus Police Chief Chet Madison on the intentional role they are playing to create a culture of inclusion belonging, and safety for all. Now, today, the Secretary said a lot of powerful things. The words that struck me most were, you can do anything you choose to do. All you have to do is be bold enough to walk through the door. And if you want to continue conversations on topics like this one, be sure to place a hold on your calendars for the Anti-Racism and Inclusive Campus Symposium happening in the ballroom and throughout the University Union on March 28th from 8:30 to 4. Do you think you have what it takes to become a change maker on campus? Do you have an idea or a solution that can ignite positive change for our communities? Do you have new strategies for teaching and learning and professional development that further the goals and objectives within our anti-racism and inclusive action plan? Is your club organizatively creating and opportunities for community building already increase feelings of mattering members? Focus on elevating existing work, increasing collective awareness, diversity, equity, and inclusion topics, and most importantly, developing our capacity, collaborative action. Sorry, technical difficulty. So, for collaborative action, they're sparking ideas that will improve the collective Hornet experience. So, we're going to encourage you to go check out the History of Reparations exhibit in the lobby suite on your way out, where you will find a symposium interest form that you can fill out to learn more. But the point is this: if you're not involved, the work doesn't get done. So, if you're interested in submitting a proposal for leading a workshop, pitching a solution, or coming and joining our Shark Tank style idea sort of generating moment, or to volunteer, you can sign up and secure a spot before they fill. Finally, thank you for attending the Green and Gold Speaker Series on reparatory justice. Our commitment to elevating voices for social justice is no more exemplified than in the vision and action of state and legislative leaders such as Shirley Nash Weber, who continue to work toward increasing both opportunity and a sense of responsibility for achieving justice across our great state of California and beyond. So until next time, keep challenging the policies and practices that perpetuate the status quo and continue to courageously move toward equitable, inclusive action, activism, and change for all. Have a wonderful afternoon. Goodbye.